Good evening. This is Margaret Resendez, and I am going to share with you the story, a fairy tale from a brand new book that has come to my school library. It's called Scary Fairy Tales, is the series, and it comes from a book called The Prince and the Dragon. The actual story that I am adapting it from, is called Mr. Miaca, and it's from English Fairy Tales by Joseph Jacobs. So that's the attribution. Mr. Miaca. Tommy Grimes was a boisterous young boy who was always getting into trouble. And his mother used to tell him to beware of Mr. Miaca. And if you are running out into the street, then Mr. Miaca can snatch you up and take you home and kidnap you. And so Tommy tried very hard to be a good boy, and when he was good, he was very good. When he was bad, he was very, very bad. And so one day he was bad, and he was running from the house, and he ran out into the street, and lo and behold, there was Mr. Miaca, and he snatched him up, and he put him inside his sack, and he took him home. And when he dumped him out onto the ground, he took a look at he took a look at Tommy and said, "Boy, you're a little tough, but you've got some muscle on you. I bet you'll be good boiled." And he's getting the pot ready, and he looks around. He goes, "Oh, but I've forgotten the herbs." He goes, "Stay here, and while I go get some herbs to cook with." So he calls his wife, Mr. Miaca does, and he says, "Wife, come in here." And in comes Mrs. Miaca. She goes, "Yes, dear." She goes, "Well, this is the boy I have for supper, but I've forgotten the herbs. Keep an eye on him while I run to the store and get some." And so she goes, "Of course, dear. Well, I'll take care of it." And Mr. Miaca goes off. So Tommy looks at Mrs. Miaca and he says, "Well, does Mr. Miaca often have little boys for supper?" And she says, often, when he can get them, when they're bad, when he gets a hold of them." Because, "Well, do you often have boys for supper without anything else? You never had anything else with your boy meat? Something like, pudding or something like that?" So Mrs. Miaca said, "Well, I love some pudding, but we don't often get that here." And Tommy says, "Well, my mom happens to be making pudding this very afternoon. Would you like me to go get some?" Mrs. Miaca says, "Wow, that's very thoughtful of you. That would be great. Just hurry on, don't dawdle, and be back for supper." Well, Tommy takes advantage of it and runs off, and he runs back home, and he is so relieved that for several days he's very good, and he takes care of himself, and he never goes back, of course, and he's good for several days. And then all of a sudden he is bad one day, and he runs out into the street, and of course Mr. Miaca is there to snatch him up and put him back in the bag and take him home. And so Tommy's once again captured by Mr. Miaca, and when he gets to the house, and Mr. Miaca dumps out the bag, and he goes, "Well, you're the boy that tricked my wife and I and ran away. Well, we're not going to make it that easy for you to do that again." And so he says, "This time I want you to go underneath the sofa, and I'm going to sit on the sofa while we wait for the water to boil for our supper." And so so Tommy dutifully crawls underneath the sofa, and Mr. Miaca sits down on the sofa, and they wait. And they wait, and they wait. Eventually, Mr. Miaca gets tired of waiting, and so he yells for his wife, "Wife! Wife! What's taking so long?" And she doesn't answer, so he says, "Boy, stick out your leg. I'm going to take care of it so you won't run away." And so he sticks out a leg. Tommy sticks out a leg, and Mr. Miaca chops it off, puts it in the pot, and says, "Now you won't run away." And he goes looking for his wife, saying, "What's taking so long?" And as Mr. Miaca leaves, Tommy runs out from underneath the sofa, and because it was a sofa leg that he'd stuck out for him to cut off. And so he runs away, and from then on, he learned his lesson. He is not going to run out into the street anymore, and he is going to be a very good boy until he's old enough for him to go in the street by himself. And that's the story of Mr. Miaca.